If Iran blocks the Strait of Hormuz, what impact would it have on the entire world? And which country would be affected the most? First, let's understand what the Strait of Hormuz actually is. It is a narrow 33-kilometer wide passage located between Iran, Oman, and the UAE. It is a thin maritime route through which about 20% of the world's oil supply passes, roughly 17 million barrels of oil. This oil comes from 8 countries in the Persian Gulf, including Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. About 90% of the oil exports from UAE, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and Qatar pass through this narrow route to the rest of the world. If Iran blocks the Strait of Hormuz, which countries would suffer the most? At number 1 is India, because India imports about 85% of its oil, and 60% of that comes from Middle Eastern countries like Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and the UAE. Fuel prices in India would skyrocket, causing massive disruption in industries linked to oil. Industries could shut down, jobs could be lost, and the economy would be severely affected. The second most affected country would be China. China is the world's largest oil importer, importing around 10 million barrels per day. About 40% of China's oil imports pass through the Strait of Hormuz. Although China has built oil pipelines with Russia and Central Asia, they do not even fulfill 20% of its energy needs. That's why blocking the strait could deal a massive blow to China's economy. And if China's economy shakes, the effects will be felt worldwide. The third most affected country would be Japan, as it imports about 90% of its oil, and 75% of that comes through the Strait of Hormuz. The fourth most affected country would be Saudi Arabia. Around 80% of Saudi oil exports pass through the Strait of Hormuz, while only about 10% goes to Europe via the Red Sea. If this choke point is blocked, it could severely impact Saudi Arabia's economy. If 80 to 90% of a country's revenue is cut off, the consequences can be devastating. There is also a strong possibility that Saudi Arabia might use its military to reopen the route, which could further escalate the situation. At number 5 is Pakistan, which receives about 90% of its oil through the Strait of Hormuz. Pakistan fulfills about 27% of its energy needs from oil, so blocking this route could lead to massive inflation. However, an interesting point is that Pakistan shares a border with Iran, and according to several government reports, about 35% of Pakistan's diesel unofficially comes from Iran. This means that if the route is blocked, the government might start sourcing oil directly from Iran, either unofficially or even officially. Next is the UAE, as around 72% of its oil exports pass through this route. The UAE does have an alternative, the Habshan-Fujairah pipeline, which allows it to bypass the strait and export up to 60% of its oil. However, given the size of its economy, even a 40% loss could be very dangerous. After that come European countries like France, Germany, and Italy, which on average get about 10% of their oil through the Strait of Hormuz. They would also face significant impact. On a global level, oil prices are predicted to rise above $150 per barrel, which could trigger massive inflation worldwide and potentially push the global economy into a severe recession. So this small 33-kilometer wide area has the power to shake the entire world. Like and subscribe.